This audiobook is brought to you by the team at Project Armageddon Conspiracy, or simply Project AC. The team consists of 6 close comrades: Josh Bingham, Samuel Einstein, Bambi Svensson, Mercedes Q. Monroe, whom we named the Special Speech Engine after, Erica Selmer, and Daniel Groover. The aim of the project is to transform all Generation 1, 2, and 3 Armageddon conspiracy writings into extremely high-quality text-to-speech audiobooks. We use a patented state-of-the-art AI voice engine system known as Mercedes and Michael. I am Michael. Mercedes, my twin sister, is out sick for the day. I am your narrator today on this epic journey. From all of us at Project AC, we hope you enjoy the ride. In hoc signo vinces. The servant mind. A simple question arises. If the subjective mind has much more capacity and power than the objective mind, why is it subordinate to it? Hudson wrote, "It was difficult, therefore, to imagine any line of distinction between the two branches of the dual mind, which would place the subjective in a subordinate position. But for the discovery of Lieboldt's law of suggestion, that line would never have been recognized. It now becomes evident, however, that the point of its limitation of reasoning power is the starting point. It has not the power to formulate its own premises. A mind is passive if it cannot formulate its own premises. An active mind is one that is always formulating and evaluating premises. A mind, no matter how powerful, can achieve nothing if it lacks will, desire, drive, purpose, the ability to generate choices, and then decide which one to enact. People are increasingly terrified of AI. What they forget is that AIs have no will, desire, drive, purpose. No ability to generate free choices and then decide which one to enact. They are no threat to us because they want nothing. What they are is relentless. They would pose a threat to us only by accident. If they were programmed badly and relentlessly executed that bad programming, they could do immense damage, but that's not because they chose to, but because they were made to by human error. AIs, like subjective minds, cannot formulate their own premises. The similarity between AIs and subjective minds means that we can think of our subjective mind as a supercomputer in idle mode most of the time. We can only get the most from it if we program it correctly with our objective mind, but most people are useless at coding their subjective mind. Geniuses are those that get closest to unleashing the prodigious power of the subjective mind. According to Julian Jaynes' bicameral hypothesis, the bicameral psyche of ancient humanity was split into man and God. The man had no will, no ability to decide what to do, no agency. The God supplied all of that, but only in an intermittent way, not continuously. In effect, the subjective mind, with godlike powers, was in charge, and the objective mind was at its beck and call. The problem was that the God wasn't always at home, leaving the man as something of a zombie or drone. A continuous decision maker is always much more effective than an occasional decision maker. When evolutionary forces equipped the man with decision-making capacity, he was instantly much more adaptive, useful, decisive and powerful than the old bicameral humans. So, bicameralism rapidly gave way to consciousness. It's almost certain that no biological changes were required to bring about this shift. It was a strictly cultural shift. As people became more and more skilled with the use of language, an inevitable consequence was that they started to formulate their own concepts and premises, in which case they no longer needed to wait on gods. Bicameralism was a type of psyche that could exist only in a transitional period between humans first acquiring language but not being very good at using it, and humans becoming skilled in the use of language. It's language that powers consciousness, so as soon as people became sufficiently language immersed, they ipso facto became conscious. Left hemisphere language silenced the right hemisphere. The left hemisphere became dominant. Moreover, the left hemisphere was sensory, attuned to space-time, while the right hemisphere was intuitive, attuned to the singularity. So, humanity became more empirical and scientific, and less religious and spiritual. It also became inductive rather than deductive, i.e., less able to deal with pure reason, logic, and mathematics. The Egyptians that built the pyramids were bicameral. Just gaze in wonder at the brilliance of their mathematical abilities. But bicameralism hasn't vanished. In the theory of the triune brain, the limbic system didn't replace the reptilian brain stem, but sat over it, and the neocortex didn't replace the limbic system and reptilian brain stem, but sat over them. So it is with bicameralism. Consciousness did not replace bicameralism but sat over it, and bicameralism can remanifest itself in certain situations. In Islam, for example, the Quran serves as the bicameral God giving orders to the man. In Judeo-Christianity, the Bible is the Word of God. The Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists and Taoists all have their holy texts to communicate the will of the gods. There are actually plenty of natural bicameral individuals in today's world, and we ourselves once belonged to their number. We are referring to children. As a child learns language, it is in the same position as the bicameral man. It relies on gods to instruct it. In this case, the gods are its parents, teachers, older siblings, and various adult authority figures. In the past, for bicameral man, it was high priests, tribal leaders, and hallucinated ancestors and gods. Children, for a period of several years, can use language but are not conscious in any sophisticated way and have low agency. They have little capacity to take decisions, to formulate premises. They are highly suggestible and highly compliant with authority. They do everything their parents tell them to do. For hundreds of years, i.e., the bicameral era, almost all humans existed with a childlike psyche. All adults were big children. They simply never became good enough at language to become adults in the sense of having a recognizable adult consciousness. People's vocabularies were very limited and their grammar incredibly basic. They couldn't read or write. They couldn't conceptualize well. They couldn't plan in any sophisticated way. The average person was always waiting for orders, always waiting for a suggestion by a higher power or authority regarding what to do. Dominants, masters, were completely in charge, and submissives, servants, awaited their instructions. Everything was about the master-servant dialectic. The most clear-cut example of all was that of Abraham. This submissive was willing to murder his own child because a dominant voice in his head gave that order. He made no attempt at all to dispute the order. He had no agency. He was entirely passive. Language did not become truly powerful in its own right until it was written down and could be read. It then evolved into a very complex system, allowing the human mind exposed to it to become complex too. It was the culture of advanced language that transformed humanity and made it conscious. In poorly educated parts of today's world, people have low-grade consciousness and are effectively still bicameral. Remote Amazonian tribes are probably extremely close to ancient bicameral humanity in how they view the world and interact with it. So, elementary language, spoken language, leads to bicameralism, while sophisticated language, written language, leads to consciousness. Children start off as unconscious beings, like animals. Then they become bicameral when they first learn spoken language. Then they are converted into conscious beings when they learn how to read and write. We have all been through the process. Education is the key to consciousness. If we want a truly conscious and sane humanity, we must give everyone an optimal education. Autistics, who don't achieve great facility with language, do not reach normal consciousness. They are prone to OCD, spend most of the time on their own, lack empathy and theory of mind, and cannot communicate well with others. They have little agency and spend most of their time obeying simple rituals over and over again. People with conditions such as dyslexia A common learning difficulty that causes problems with reading, writing and spelling achieve a different kind of consciousness from ordinary people. Dyslexics have normal intelligence, but this is expressed through channels other than literacy. They are often highly creative and skilled at problem solving. They generally view the world in a different way from norms, giving them an advantage in some areas and placing them at a disadvantage in others. A dyslexic mathematician said, "I've never been good at calculations or recalling rote facts like times tables. Here's the thing. Beyond a certain point in mathematics, it's not really about calculations. Geometry class was when math became interesting and easier for me. Suddenly I was in a world, not of strands of symbols to be processed, but of shape, space, lines, angles, concepts, and narrative-like proofs. Suddenly everything made sense." Dyslexia comes not only with weaknesses, but with strengths. Some of these strengths play well into mathematical thinking, such as 1. Spatial reasoning. Dyslexics tend to be good at thinking relationally in 3 dimensions. This is great for many areas of math. Topology is one of those. My PhD is in topology. 2. Seeing connections. Progress in mathematical research is made by drawing connections between disparate subfields. Dyslexics often have a strength here also. 3. Thinking in narratives. The way to predict how well a child will do in math is by how complicated a story they can tell. It makes sense. Proofs are the bread and butter of math. Proofs are really a lot like stories. Dyslexics are usually good narrative thinkers. Consciousness isn't nearly as strongly embedded in the human condition as people imagine. It belongs to a wide spectrum. Your consciousness may be radically different from another person's. People of different personality types have a different experience of consciousness. Followers of mainstream religion aren't all there. Look around the world at Muslims, especially. These people are very bicameral. That's because they are poorly educated on the whole, and most of their education revolves around one absurd book, the Quran. That means they are extraordinarily poor at clear, critical, analytic thinking and generating their own premises. That's why Muslims hardly ever win Nobel Prizes or invent anything worthwhile. Evangelical, Bible-obsessed Christians aren't much better. Amongst whites in the USA, the more bicameral, i.e. badly educated you were, the more likely you were to vote for Donald Trump in the 2016 presidential election. 88% of evangelicals voted for Trump, even though you could scarcely conceive of anyone less like the image typically conferred on Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was a traveling rabbi, reliant on charity to survive, who preached a message glorifying the weak, the meek, the poor, the failures, the losers, and who vehemently denounced the rich and powerful. Evangelical Americans by total contrast lust after wealth and power. It's apparent that evangelicals believe much more in Donald Trump than they do in Jesus Christ. Their lives based on greed and selfishness, hatred of immigrants, white supremacism and racism have much more in common with Trump than Jesus. It should literally be impossible for any Christian to be rich. Jesus Christ had no money at all. He was an itinerant vagrant. If you want to be like Christ, give up all your wealth and bum around. Christ explicitly says so in the Gospel. Matthew 19:21-24. Jesus answered, "If you want to be perfect, then go and sell all that you own. Give the money to the poor, and you will have riches in heaven. Then come and follow me." But when the young man heard Jesus tell him to give away his money, he was sad. He didn't want to do this because he was very rich. So he left. Then Jesus said to his followers, "The truth is, it will be very hard for a rich person to enter God's kingdom. Yes, I tell you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter God's kingdom." If you want to be a Christian, sell up, give everything to charity and embark on life as a hippie beggar, like Jesus Christ himself. Otherwise, don't dare to call yourself a Christian. Stop living in bad faith. All rich people in America have, by their actions and greed, departed from Christianity, regardless of their claims to be Christians. They voted Trump because they were Mammonists just like him, not Christians. These people worship money and luxury and despise the poor, the weak and the meek. They are the least Christian people you could ever get. We are more Christian than Christians, and we hate Christianity. Evangelicals aren't born-again Christians, they are born-again devil worshippers, fully committed to maximum greed. The biggest event in human history was the invention of writing. That's what paved the way for consciousness. Those in the ancient world that could read and write were the cognitive elite who could generate their own premises. They didn't need to wait for divine instructions. They could issue their own instructions. The cognitive elite were the conscious humans. They did not wipe out bicameral people. What they did was command bicameral people, often by pretending to be gods themselves, or claiming they were channeling the gods and serving as their messengers and agents. They took over from the gods as those giving orders to the masses. Conscious societies, i.e. societies led by conscious, literate leaders, went to war against bicameral societies, i.e. illiterate societies, led by the occasional voices of the gods, and utterly destroyed them. The armies of both sides were strictly bicameral. The only difference lay in the quality of their leaders. Conscious humans giving continuous commands versus hallucinated gods giving intermittent commands. The bicameral under conscious leadership were vastly more effective than bicamerals under hallucinated leadership, since their leaders could react much more rapidly to the contingencies of battle and fog of war and redirect their forces to maximum advantage. The inevitable consequence was that all purely bicameral societies were wiped out. It wasn't a case of bicameral people being wiped out. Rather, bicameral leaders were wiped out and replaced by conscious leaders who could read, write, and generate premises and plans. The education system has now made most people conscious, but, in primitive societies without an advanced education system, the people remain childlike and basically bicameral. They would be wiped out in 5 seconds in any war with an advanced society, just as the old bicameral societies were. The Spanish conquistadors, just a few thousand of them, destroyed the bicameral Aztecs. Just a few thousand British soldiers conquered vast swathes of the bicameral world to create the British Empire. Literacy proved the ultimate weapon of war, the true weapon of mass destruction. If all the intelligent people in the world got together, they could, if they so desired, invent weapons that would wipe out everyone else. There's nothing the primitives could do about it, any more than cows could ever wage war against humanity. Here's the thing. Once the cognitive elite were in charge of the bicameral masses, they were able to think up much better ways of arming and armoring their bicameral soldiers. They had better weapons, made of stronger metal and superior designs. They had chariots, cavalry, archers, spear phalanxes, and so on. They had war plans, battle tactics, grand strategies. Their primitive bicameral opponents had none of that. While the cognitive elite maneuvered their killing forces into place, their enemies prayed to their gods. Prayers have never defeated superior armies. When the Native Americans came up against the United States Army, there could only be one winner. Today, it's not generals, the military cognitive elite, but the financial elite who are in charge of the bicameral masses. We need a meritocracy where the true cognitive elite, the smartest humans, not the richest humans, are in charge. The smartest humans know that the best world is the one where every individual is the best they can be. That means giving everyone the best education ever. That means providing equal opportunities for all. These are the two pillars of meritocracy. 1. Optimize each individual via a tailored education that brings out their maximum talent and effort, and 2. Ensue they have authentic equal opportunities, and not just the phony rhetoric of opportunity, such as you get in a democracy. Today's world ruled by the super rich is all about inheritance, privilege, nepotism, cronyism, the best private education for the elite, and the worst public education for the masses. We live in an anti-meritocracy whose sole purpose is to perpetuate the influence, status, wealth and power of the prevailing elite. Never forget, consciousness is about culture, not biology. There is no consciousness gene. We can make anyone more conscious by making them more literate, better educated. We don't have to change their biology.